Lykeion Books presents Saltwater Witch by Chris Howard, Book 1 in the Seaborn Trilogy. Read for you by the author.
Chapter 5 Epheros. Metrothi stood on the threshold, fuming and snorting like an ox, her shoulders pumping up and down on each side of her head. She was still a little bent from the dustpan incident, but the painkillers had obviously kicked in. She paused a moment as if to gather up her rage, and stormed into the hall, boots thudding, fists up. "What the hell are you doing up here?" Cassandra tried to look innocent, eyes wide and innocent. "That's how you'll get out of this." Mouth hanging wide open, surprised I'm not drooling. To cover up what was probably a stupid look on her face, Cassandra said, Nothing. Nothing unusual is going on." "Then why does it sound like you're training several herds of elephants?" What, was she blind? That was hit. Cassandra turned and pointed. Gigantic, enormous, water monster Epheros was gone. He had simply vanished. Cassandra finished what she was about to say. Him. Metrothi caught that one word and was about to beat the hell out of her with it. Him? Him? Cassandra still had one obvious question to answer. Where could something that big go in a hurry? Not to mention vanish in a flash and leave behind total chaos. She stared around the hall. All of the beds had been pulled away from the walls. Some were angled and stacked together along the center of the room. Blinking a couple times didn't seem to work. Cassandra had to rub her eyes, not sure that she was seeing things right. She started to ask about the beds, then shut her mouth. Play dumb. Don't make eye contact. There's a chance the predator has already killed today. Metrothi took another step down what remained of the aisle, wrinkled her nose, and sniffed the salt in the air. What is that stink? It's like something I've smelled before. I know it. Metrothi's searchlight gaze moved around the room, over the beds and windows. A worried frown slowly formed on her face as she took in the disaster area. But after a minute of silence, the old grimace returned. She was nearly all the way to her usual bitter, angry self when she noticed a pattern in the way the beds had been arranged. Then she exploded. "What is that?" The first 13 beds spelled out, "Ha ha," with Deirdre's bed and nightstand positioned as the exclamation point. Metrothi hit some record depth of rage, her fists clenched into knuckle-whitening knots. She blew foamy spit from her mouth. More saliva squeezed through her grinding teeth, sucked in and out with her breath. The director lunged. Cassandra wheeled and ducked, but Metrothi got her by the ear and brought her up straight. "Who are you talking about, girl? Who is this him?" Cassandra tried to pull out of Metrothi's hold, fingers digging into her wrist. "No one. I don't know." "Who is it? Where are you hiding him?" Metrothi scanned the room. Her voice dropped to a cold whisper. "Tell me now, Cassandra." I really don't know. Did he help you do this with the other girls' beds?" "No." "Who is he?" Metrothi pulled her ear harder, started shaking her. "Spit it out. Who is he? Who is he? Who is he?" Cassandra's head was pounding, and there was a rushing water noise closing on them, but still far away. Metrothi yanked down, threw her to her knees, letting go of her. Then there was a loud slurping noise. Cassandra bent over, one hand pressed to her ear, hot and stretched by the feeling of it. Metrothi was screaming from far away. "Deranged monster, I hope you fell out a window." When she looked up, Epheros was back, stretching over most of the room again, spanning half the far wall and wearing a grin. His teeth a tight row of icicles, the circumference of tree trunks. And there was Metrothi, floating in the watery space about halfway between the floor and the ceiling. "Oh my God," Epheros ate the director. Stop, don't!" Cassandra danced around with her hands on her head, stuttering the first parts of several demands that apparently made no sense. Epheros ignored her. He bent around to glare at his stomach with Metrothi in her unfashionable vest struggling inside the wall of water. "I believe you are referring to me," he rumbled. "You made use of the pronoun he and its objective case him several times. I am he who rearranged the beds. It was an amusing trifle to entertain the princess. I had no idea she was under the care of such a vulgar, whatever you are." Evaros studied the struggling Ms. Metrothi with interest, teeth clicking and water sloshing along his shoulders. "I do not know what it is about you, but you are not what you appear to be." Metrothi's shrieking was crackly and weak, her eyes bulging from her face. Evaros straightened, as much as he could in the hall, and vomited his wriggling breakfast onto the floor. Metrothi flopped about pathetically like a gigantic landed fish, mouth gaping, sucking in air, her body covered in thick, clear slime, whatever Evaros used for digestive juices. She wiped it off her face, and the goop stuck to her fingers, pulling away in ropey webs. "What is your name?" Evaros boomed down at her. Metrothi spent a minute struggling to get to her feet, and when she didn't answer right away, he nudged her playfully with a giant, watery finger. She slipped and fell flat on the slimy floor, her legs splayed. Ephoros's mouth closed on one side, and his brows connected into a frowning expression. He waited for Ms. Metrothi to get to her feet again, then he dropped one massive finger right over the top of her. It went to the floor, enclosing her in a column of water. The director's arms snapped to her sides, and then her body went rigid. Her eyes stared ahead stupidly. Ephoros whispered something in another language, a long string of words that made the water prison undulate. He lifted his finger away. Metrothi, dripping wet, without one look at Cassandra, walked briskly to the door, opened it, stepped out, and closed it behind her. Ephoros sighed. "She will remember nothing of what just happened. Where did she go?" "I have sent her to clean her teeth." He shook his head distastefully, water going everywhere. "Did no one teach her to care for them?" Even more monstrous than I thought. "Who are you?" "I have told you. You may call me Ephoros. I have other names, many, but that is one that I have used for many hundreds of years." "And the princess?" "Am I not speaking loud enough?" "Oh, come on, me? You are the wreath-wearer." She looked up at him, curling her lip on one side. It didn't sound like something she wanted to be. "The what?" "The one who is wreathed, the one who wears the gift of Poseidon." She continued staring, her mouth dropping open. Her tongue was picking at her teeth all by itself. God of the sea, that Poseidon? She shook her head. Help me out here. "You are the daughter of Ampherate, a princess of House Alcimedes, the royal house of the Thalassogenes." He looked down at her, and she gave him back her totally lost look. "Your father was a lord of House Rexenor, but he disappeared not long after you were born. I would never tell anything but the truth to the wearer of the wreath." The way he said the word, it was clear that it came with a capital W. What's the wreath?" "It is part of you. It is a circlet, a victory wreath, fashioned of the plants of the sea. I can see what the gift-giver himself used to craft its outward manifestation. Woven seagrass, intricately branched pink merle, dark bands of Sebdenia. But most others will only see its radiance, and only you will be able to use and see the wreath's inner manifestation. Your mother must have given it to you before you were able to receive it. When you were an infant." Cassandra's brain stalled on the first part of his answer, unable to get more out of it than the wreath was made of different seaweeds. And then the mention of her mother brushed all the other thoughts aside. "My mother?" she whispered, biting back a wave of sickness. "Is she alive?" Shaking his head sadly. "No. You cannot unwear the wreath. Once it is given, you wear it until you die." Cassandra tried to wave that away. "There was a voice in the lake yesterday, talking to me, almost like a dream. It was a woman, not the witch, someone else. She couldn't tell me her name. She told me to breathe, and then I could breathe, underwater." "That was probably not your mother. Ampherate died giving you the wreath." "Why?" "That is the way it is done. When you pass on the gift, you become a part of it forever. Your mother is still part of you. If your mother had spoken to you, you would know. You would hear her in your thoughts. She would talk to you as I am talking to you. She would tell you her name and your history. There are many others in there, 40 or more generations of Alcimedes. It can only be passed to one of the royal family of your house." "But what is it? I can't see anything." Cassandra ran her fingers through her hair, and in the open space around her head. "I'm not wearing a wreath." Ephoros looked down at her a minute, and then nodded his head. "You seem old enough. Perhaps you are not yet strong enough. In time, you will be able to see it and feel its weight and strength, and you might also be able to speak with Inferite, and to many of the wearers of the past. It has powers that are unknown to me. Only the wreathed know what they can really do. Cassandra ran her fingers through her hair again, pulling it behind her ears. With a few hand waves, Ephoros rearranged the room, sliding the beds and nightstands back where they belonged. You really knew my mother? For too short a time. Then what happened to her? She started with the first question that came to her, but like an overflowing pot on the stove, more questions boiled up, hundreds at a time, overlapping, joining to make bigger ones, some rising all the way to her lips. How did I get here? In Nebraska, I mean. I don't belong here, do I? What are you really? You said Metrothi's not what she appears? Who is she? Why does she hate me so much?
Sometimes it seems like she isn't in control of her actions, as if someone else is making her hurt me. Is that even possible?
I ran into a witch in a lake yesterday. Who is she? She attacked me by screaming at me, and I did the same back to her. Who am I? Please tell me. Tell me I'm not a psycho. He kept nodding his head at each question, and then when she stopped, he started at the top with her mother. Inferite was... He went quiet, gave her a look full of sorrow and impatience, and then turned to the door. What is it? I must go. What? You just got here. There is someone coming. 6 someones by the sound. Hold out your hand. Open it. Quickly. Face up. When can I talk to you again? When you are alone. I can only remain above the ocean's surface for a short period. I must return to the water, and cannot allow myself to be trapped up here. But I can remove myself from the memory of one thinling. I must not be seen by many, especially above the waves. Hurry. But what's a thinling? Do it, he urged in the softest rumble he could produce. Let the water drop slide back into the tear duct in one of your eyes. They are the gateways through which Ephoros vanished into a little bead of water that kept its spherical shape and rolled into the center of her palm. And suddenly everything in the hall was dry. Ephoros seemed to have taken all the water with him. Cassandra sat down on her bed just as the door flew open and a group of 9-year-olds entered. They looked around the hall, impressed with her cleaning job. A couple of them smiled thinly, but didn't look over at her. She could feel their fear. Yep, psycho drowned girl back from the dead. She almost smiled. Cassandra fell back on her pillow and let the bead roll into her right eye, wondering if it would work. Tears typically don't return on their own once cried out, do they? She didn't know much about crying, but that didn't sound right. She felt the hard water drop wobble into the corner of her eye, and with a jolt of pain that shot through her head, her eye sort of sucked it inside. Okay, that felt weird. Cassandra blinked, focusing on the hall of the 9 to 16's girls' department of St. Clement's Education Center. Everything had nearly returned to the way it had always been. She was alone. She closed her eyes and tried to remember her mother's song. Nothing came to her, but she hardly noticed. Cassandra's mind raced with everything that had changed in her life. Lake witches breathing underwater, some wreath thing, and Ephoros, a king among the offspring of Poseidon. After dinner, Metrothi swung the door in and stamped her feet. Every last tooth brushed. Post-Ephoros, there didn't seem to be anything different about her, but Cassandra couldn't get a good look with so much commotion in the hall. Line up! Everyone scrambled to get in line, dropping phones, books, and game decks. They formed up, shuffling around and making room for a few caught out of line. The youngest and those with the fewest friends were usually the last to get in. They were sent off to the back like losers in musical chairs. Deirdre Milhorn was first in line, as usual. The first few got the hottest showers. Metrothi walked down the row, making a real effort to glare. Doesn't she get tired of that? The bucket of bathroom cleaning equipment was swinging in her fist, and it was pretty obvious who was going to be singled out for a bit of extra work. Psycho girl, back at the line. Take the cleaning supplies with you. Cassandra just managed to hold in something abusive, grinding her teeth, then snatched the bucket away from the director and went to the end of the line. The water would be ice cold by the time it was her turn. Metrothi made surprise visits over the next 2 hours, coming in without warning and standing by the hall door, And Cassandra, still in line and waiting with a book from English class, moved closer to the bathrooms every 20 minutes, nudging the bucket of cleaning supplies along the floor with her feet. Fortunately, most of the girls took short showers. When her turn finally came around, she got the bathroom to herself, and of course, the hot and cold felt the same when she spun the knobs. Not that it mattered. The water temperature didn't even make it through the soup-thick daydream she had going. Cassandra couldn't spare a thought on how cold it was. Letting the water run through her hair, down her face, she let her gaze settle on the grid of tiles, while in her head she jumped back to Red Bear Lake, trying to work out how drowning and breathing underwater worked. Something inside her was building, a sense of wonder at the glimpse she had caught of a different world. Cassandra was so closed down around her memories of the lake, she didn't notice the eyes of 3 witches staring at her through the flow of water pouring from the shower. Not at first.